I woke up to 3 missed calls from a number I didn't recognize, which should have been my first warning that this Tuesday in January was about to go sideways. The voicemails were all from someone named Deborah Sullivan, president of the Timber Ridge Homeowners Association in Fairbanks, Alaska, and she sounded absolutely furious about something involving my property. The thing is, I don't own property in Timber Ridge. I'm Zachary Yates, a forest ranger with the United States Forest Service, and I live in a modest cabin about 15 miles outside the subdivision she kept mentioning. I was pouring my second cup of coffee when my phone rang again. Same number. "This is Zachary," I answered, trying to keep my tone neutral despite the early hour. "Mr. Yates, this is Deborah Sullivan from Timber Ridge HOA. We have towed your illegal snow machine from our community trails, and you now owe us $850 in towing fees, plus a $500 fine for unauthorized use of private property." I nearly dropped my coffee mug. "I'm sorry, what? You towed my snow machine?" "Yes, the one you left on our trails. It's been sitting there for 2 days, which is a clear violation of our Community Guidelines Section 7.3, which explicitly states that no motorized vehicles are permitted on our recreational trails except for authorized maintenance vehicles." "Madam, I need to stop you right there. I didn't leave any snow machine on your trails. My snow machine is registered to the Forest Service and is used exclusively for official business in the Chugach National Forest area. Where exactly did you tow it from?" "From the Silver Birch Trail, which runs through our community. Your vehicle was parked directly on our property, blocking access for our residents who pay substantial HOA fees to maintain these amenities." I felt my jaw clench. The Silver Birch Trail she was referring to was actually a public access route that had existed for decades before Timber Ridge was even developed. The Forest Service maintained that trail, and I had used it just last week while conducting a survey of winter wildlife patterns. But I definitely hadn't left my snow machine there. "Miss Sullivan, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Can you describe the snow machine you towed? It's a red and white Polaris with some kind of government markings on it. The registration number is FS 437AK. Now, when can you come pay these fees and remove your vehicle from our impound lot?" My blood ran cold. That was definitely my snow machine, and those were definitely Forest Service markings. But I had parked it securely at the ranger station 3 days ago after my last patrol. Someone had either stolen it or moved it, and this HOA had decided to tow federal property without bothering to check what those government markings actually meant. "Miss Sullivan, that snow machine is federal property. It belongs to the United States Forest Service. You've just towed a government vehicle, which is a serious problem. I need the address of where you're holding it immediately." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Federal property? That's ridiculous. If it was federal property, what was it doing abandoned on our trails?" "That's what I'm trying to figure out. I parked that snow machine at the Fairbanks Ranger Station 3 days ago. If it ended up on your trails, someone moved it there without authorization. But regardless of how it got there, you've now impounded federal property, and I need it returned immediately." "Well, Mr. Yates, I don't care who you say you work for. We have regulations in this community and everyone has to follow them. You can pick up your snow machine once you pay the fees. Otherwise, it will be sold at auction in 30 days according to our bylaws." I took a deep breath, trying to maintain my composure. "Madam, you cannot auction off federal property. That's illegal. I'm going to contact my supervisor and the local authorities about this. In the meantime, do not do anything else with that snow machine. Do you understand?" "Are you threatening me?" Because I'll have you know that our HOA has a very strong legal team, and we've dealt with plenty of people who think the rules don't apply to them. This isn't about rules not applying. This is about you having towed property that belongs to the federal government. Give me the address where you're holding it. She rattled off an address on Willow Creek Drive, then added, "Our impound lot is only open from 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. You'll need to bring cash or a cashier's check. We don't accept personal checks or credit cards." "I'll be there within the hour," I said, and hung up before she could argue further. I immediately called my supervisor, Tom Richardson, who had been with the Forest Service for 25 years and had seen just about everything. When I explained the situation, he let out a long whistle. "They towed FS 437. Zachary, that Snowmachine, was reported missing yesterday afternoon. I was about to file a formal theft report. One of the mechanics noticed it was gone from the lot. We thought maybe someone had taken it out on unauthorized patrol. Someone definitely took it out, but not me. And now it's sitting in some HOA's impound lot, and they're trying to charge us over $1,000 in fees. Don't pay them anything. I'm going to contact our regional legal team and the Fairbanks Police Department. This is theft of federal property, and if this HOA is refusing to return it, they're compounding the problem. Head over there and document everything. Take photos, get names, and don't sign anything. I'll meet you there as soon as I can." I grabbed my Forest Service jacket, badge, and camera, then headed out to my truck. The drive to Timber Ridge took about 30 minutes through winding roads lined with snow-covered spruce trees. The subdivision itself was one of those newer developments that had sprung up in the last 5 years, catering to wealthy retirees and remote workers who wanted the Alaska experience without actually roughing it. The houses were massive log cabin-style structures with perfectly manicured yards, even in the middle of winter. Everything looked like it had been designed by someone who had never actually lived in Alaska, but had seen a lot of pictures. The entrance to Timber Ridge had an elaborate wooden gate with stone pillars, though the gate itself was open. A large sign proclaimed the community guidelines, including no parking on streets overnight, no external clotheslines, and all snow removal must be completed within 24 hours of snowfall. I drove through and followed the signs to Willow Creek Drive, where I found a small building marked HOA Office and Community Services. The parking lot had about 6 cars, and around back, I could see a fenced area that appeared to be the impound lot. Sure enough, my red and white Polaris was sitting there, clearly visible with its Forest Service decals and identification numbers. I took several photos from different angles, making sure to capture the government markings and the current location. Then I walked into the HOA office, where a young woman sat at her reception desk looking bored. "I'm here to speak with Deborah Sullivan about a snow machine that was towed from the trails," I said, showing her my Forest Service identification. Her eyes widened slightly. "Oh, you're the guy she was talking about. Let me get her. Have a seat." The waiting area was decorated with photos of Timber Ridge in various seasons, all showing happy residents engaging in wholesome activities like cross-country skiing, hiking, and having barbecues. A large poster on the wall outlined the Timber Ridge Promise, which guaranteed a maintenance-free lifestyle where all amenities were professionally managed. Another poster detailed the strict architectural guidelines that all homes had to follow. Deborah Sullivan emerged from a back office, and she looked exactly like I had imagined. She was probably in her early 50s, with short blonde hair styled in a severe bob, wearing a cream-colored pantsuit with a Timber Ridge HOA badge clipped to her lapel. Her expression was a mixture of irritation and self-righteousness. Mr. Yates, I'm glad you decided to come in person. You have the payment with you, Miss Sullivan. I'm not paying anything. That snow machine is federal property, and you had no legal right to tow it. I need it released immediately. As I explained on the phone, our community has rules. We cannot allow unauthorized vehicles on our trails. It doesn't matter who owns it. Actually, it matters quite a bit, but let's start with the basics. That trail where you found the snow machine, the Silver Birch Trail, is that entirely on HOA property? Of course it is. We maintain all the trails in Timber Ridge. Are you sure about that? Because according to Forest Service records, the Silver Birch Trail is a historic public access route that predates your development by at least 40 years. It's maintained by the Forest Service and provides access to state and federal lands beyond your subdivision. Her confident expression faltered slightly. That's not what our developer told us. All the trails within our boundaries are community property. I think you should check your property surveys more carefully, but that's actually beside the point right now. You've towed a vehicle that belongs to the federal government and you're refusing to return it. That's a crime. I'm not refusing to return it. I'm simply requiring payment of legitimate fees according to our bylaws. You cannot charge the federal government fees for towing property that was potentially stolen and placed on your trails. I didn't park that snow machine there. Someone took it from the ranger station without authorization 3 days ago. Your trail is just where it ended up. Do you have proof of this theft? She asked, crossing her arms. The Fairbanks Police Department is being contacted right now about the theft. My supervisor is also coordinating with our legal team. But you need to understand something, Miss Sullivan. By refusing to immediately return federal property, you're committing a crime yourself. I strongly suggest you release that snow machine right now before this situation gets much worse for you and your HOA. Are you threatening me again? Because I'll call the police myself. Please do. I think we could all benefit from having law enforcement here to sort this out. Her face flushed red. Fine. Karen, call the police and tell them we have someone harassing us about impound fees. The receptionist, whose name I now realized was actually Karen, picked up the phone with a nervous expression. I pulled out my own phone and called Tom to give him an update. I'm about 10 minutes away, he said. The police are sending a unit as well. Don't let them move that snow machine anywhere else. Understood. I stood near the window where I could keep an eye on the impound lot. Deborah had retreated to her office but left the door open, and I could hear her on the phone with someone, presumably the HOA's attorney. Yes, he's claiming it's federal property, but it was abandoned on our trails. No, he won't pay the fees. He's threatening us with criminal charges. Well, can't we just... Okay, yes, I understand. She emerged a few minutes later looking less confident. Our attorney says I should wait for the police to arrive before proceeding further. That's probably the smartest thing your attorney has said today. We waited in uncomfortable silence for about 5 minutes, until 2 police cruisers pulled into the parking lot, followed shortly by Tom's Forest Service truck. Tom was a solid man in his late 40s with a graying beard, and the kind of presence that came from years of dealing with both wilderness emergencies and bureaucratic nonsense. The 2 police officers, a male sergeant named Phillips and a female officer named Rodriguez, came in first. Tom and I met them in the parking lot before going inside. Zachary, good to see you, though I wish it was under better circumstances, Tom said, shaking my hand. He turned to the officers. Thank you for coming. We've got a complicated situation here. Sergeant Phillips nodded. We got a call about both a harassment complaint and a theft of federal property. Why don't you walk us through what's happening? Tom explained the situation while I showed them photos on my phone of the Snowmachine at the ranger station from 4 days ago, along with the incident report about it going missing. Then we walked around to the impound lot so they could see the vehicle in question. The Forest Service markings were unmistakable. Both officers took their own photos and examined the vehicle carefully. "That's definitely government property," Officer Rodriguez said. "The question is how it got here." Deborah had followed us outside along with Karen and another man who introduced himself as Robert Hutchins, Vice President of the Timber Ridge HOA. "Officers, we simply towed an abandoned vehicle from our community trails," Robert said. He was tall and thin, probably in his 60s, with wire-rimmed glasses and a condescending tone. "We had no way of knowing it was stolen. We're the victims here." "When you towed this vehicle, did you check the registration?" Sergeant Phillips asked. "We noted the numbers, yes," Deborah said. "But it's not our responsibility to run background checks on every vehicle we tow. We have clear guidelines about unauthorized vehicles on our property. Actually, when you tow a vehicle, especially one with clear government markings, it is your responsibility to verify ownership and make reasonable attempts to contact the owner," Officer Rodriguez said. "Did you try to contact the Forest Service?" "We contacted the number we found in our system for the registered owner, which was Mr. Yates," Deborah said, pointing at me. "When did you tow it?" Tom asked. "Yesterday morning, around 9 o'clock. "And you only called me this morning," I said. "Why the delay?" "We have procedures," Deborah said defensively. "The tow company provides us with information, which we process according to our schedule. So you towed what is clearly a government vehicle, waited almost 24 hours to contact anyone, and then demanded over $1,000 in fees. Does that sum it up?" Tom's voice was calm but edged with steel. "We were following our bylaws," Robert insisted. "Everything we've done is legal according to our governing documents." Sergeant Phillips exchanged a glance with Officer Rodriguez. "Here's the situation as I see it. This vehicle belongs to the United States Forest Service. It was reported stolen. It ended up on your trails somehow. You towed it, which might have been reasonable if you had immediately tried to contact the proper authorities. Instead, you held it and attempted to extract fees. Now you're refusing to release federal property." "We're not refusing," Deborah protested. "We're simply requiring payment according to our standard procedures. You cannot charge the federal government fees without proper authorization," Tom said. "And you certainly can't hold federal property hostage over disputed fees. That's the definition of theft." "This is ridiculous," Robert said. "We're trying to maintain order in our community, and now we're being accused of theft. I think we need our attorney present before this goes any further." "That's your right," Sergeant Phillips said. "But here's what's going to happen. That Snowmachine is going to be released to Forest Service custody immediately. It's evidence in a theft investigation. If your HOA wants to pursue payment for towing fees, you can file a claim through proper legal channels. But you're not keeping federal property." "We have a lien on it," Deborah said. "According to Alaska state law, we have the right to hold vehicles until fees are paid." Officer Rodriguez shook her head. "That statute doesn't apply to government property. There are specific federal laws that supersede your HOA bylaws. If you continue to refuse to release this vehicle, you'll be charged with obstruction at minimum, possibly theft of government property." I watched Deborah's face cycle through several emotions: anger, disbelief, fear, and finally resignation. Robert looked like he wanted to argue further but was smart enough to realize they were cornered. "Fine," Deborah said through gritted teeth. "Karen, get the keys to the impound lot." The gate to the lot was opened, and Tom and I conducted a quick inspection of the Snowmachine. It appeared to be in the same condition it had been in when I last saw it, though there was now a bright orange towing sticker attached to the windscreen. Tom carefully removed it and placed it in an evidence bag. "We're going to need to file a formal report about how this ended up here," Tom said to the officers. "Someone stole this from our facility and deliberately placed it on these trails. This wasn't random. Any idea who might have done that?" Sergeant Phillips asked. "Not yet, but we have security cameras at the station. I'll pull the footage as soon as we get back." I started the Snowmachine, relieved when it turned over immediately. Tom and I took photos of the odometer and documented the condition of the vehicle for our records, while the police officers spoke with Deborah and Robert. As we were preparing to leave, a car pulled into the parking lot and an elderly woman got out, moving with remarkable speed for someone who had to be in her 70s. She was wearing a purple parka and snow boots, and her white hair was pulled back in a tight bun. "Deborah Sullivan, what is going on here?" the woman demanded. "Mrs. Patterson, this doesn't concern you," Deborah said, suddenly looking nervous. "Like hell it doesn't. I'm still a resident of this community, and I saw police cars from my window." Now someone explained to me why there's a Forest Service Snowmachine in our impound lot. "It was towed from the Silver Birch Trail," Robert said. "We were just following procedures." The woman, Mrs. Patterson, turned to look at the Snowmachine, then at Tom and me in our Forest Service jackets. Her expression shifted from confusion to anger. "You towed a government vehicle. Are you out of your minds? And why was it on the Silver Birch Trail in the first place? That's a public access route, not HOA property." "Mrs. Patterson, the developer assured us that all trails within the community boundaries are ours to maintain," Deborah said. "Then the developer lied to you, which doesn't surprise me one bit. I've lived in this area for 50 years, long before this subdivision existed. The Silver Birch Trail is public access and always has been. I told you people that when you tried to put up those ridiculous private property signs last summer. This was news to me. They put up private property signs on a public trail." "They certainly did, until the Forest Service made them take them down. I filed the complaint myself." Mrs. Patterson turned back to Deborah and Robert. "This is exactly the kind of overreach I warned the board about. You people think you can control everything, including things that don't belong to the HOA. We're trying to maintain property values and quality of life for our residents," Robert said stiffly. "By picking fights with the federal government. Brilliant strategy. I'm calling an emergency board meeting to discuss this disaster." Sergeant Phillips stepped forward. "Madam, I appreciate your concern, but right now we need to sort out the immediate issue. The Snowmachine is being released to Forest Service custody. The investigation into how it got here is ongoing." Mrs. Patterson nodded. "Good. And I hope you're going to charge whoever is responsible for this mess. The rest of us homeowners shouldn't have to pay increased HOA fees because our president doesn't understand property law." Tom and I exchanged glances. This was getting more complicated by the minute, but at least we had our Snowmachine back. We thanked the officers and prepared to transport the vehicle back to the ranger station. "We'll be in touch about the investigation," Sergeant Phillips said. "Try not to let any more government property go missing." "Believe me, we're going to be reviewing our security protocols," Tom replied. As I drove the Snowmachine slowly through the subdivision toward the exit, I noticed several residents had come out to watch the commotion. Some were taking photos with their phones. This was probably the most excitement Timber Ridge had seen in months. Back at the ranger station, Tom and I immediately went to review the security footage. The station was a modest single-story building that housed offices, a break room, equipment storage, and a vehicle bay. The camera covering the vehicle bay showed exactly what we needed to see. At 10:47 p.m. 3 nights ago, a figure in dark clothing and a ski mask had approached the vehicle bay. They had used some kind of tool to force open the side door, which wasn't covered by a camera. 8 minutes later, the same figure emerged riding my Snowmachine. They drove directly out of the camera's range. So we have a time and a method but no identification, Tom said, leaning forward to study the screen. Can you enhance this? I can try, but they were pretty careful about not showing their face. Professional, almost. Or someone who watches a lot of crime shows. Tom rewound the footage. Look at the body language. This person knew exactly where to go and what to do. They didn't hesitate or look around much. They had been here before. So someone with knowledge of our facility. Or someone who scouted it carefully beforehand. We spent the next hour reviewing footage from the days leading up to the theft, looking for anyone suspicious. The station had regular visitors, other rangers, park volunteers, contractors performing maintenance, and occasionally locals who stopped by with questions about trail conditions or permits. 2 days before the theft, a woman had stopped by claiming her dog had run off into the woods nearby. She had spent about 15 minutes talking to one of our rangers near the vehicle bay, and during that time, she had positioned herself where she could see directly into the storage area. Can we identify her? I asked. Tom zoomed in on her face. She was probably in her late 20s or early 30s, with brown hair pulled back in a ponytail, wearing expensive-looking winter gear. I don't recognize her, but we can pull stills and ask around. And look at this. He advanced the footage frame by frame. In one shot, the woman was clearly taking a photo with her phone, ostensibly of the area where her dog had supposedly gone, but the angle would have captured the vehicle bay perfectly. She was casing the place, I said. Looks like it. Now the question is why? Why steal a Forest Service Snowmachine just to abandon it on an HOA trail, to cause trouble, to make the Forest Service look bad, or to cause problems for the HOA? Tom leaned back in his chair. What if someone has a grudge against Timber Ridge and figured the best way to create chaos was to make them steal federal property? It sounded far-fetched, but I had learned in my years with the Forest Service that people did strange things for stranger reasons. So we need to find this woman and figure out what her connection is to Timber Ridge. Tom sent the clearest photos from the security footage to Sergeant Phillips, along with a full report of the theft. Phillips called back within an hour. We ran facial recognition through our database. The woman in your photos is Michelle Carpenter, age 31, lives in Fairbanks. No criminal record, but here's where it gets interesting. She's the daughter of Harold Carpenter, who was one of the original developers of Timber Ridge. Was. Tom asked, putting the phone on speaker so I could hear. Harold Carpenter died 2 years ago. According to public records, there was a nasty legal battle over his estate. Michelle claimed that her father's business partner, a man named Lawrence Fletcher, had cheated her out of her inheritance. The case was settled out of court, but there were allegations of fraud and misconduct. And does Lawrence Fletcher still have any connection to Timber Ridge? I asked. He's on the HOA board. He was actually at the meeting where they voted to increase enforcement of trail regulations last month. Tom and I looked at each other. The pieces were starting to come together. So Michelle Carpenter might have stolen our Snowmachine and placed it on Timber Ridge trails knowing the HOA would tow it, which would create a legal nightmare for them. That's our working theory, Phillips said. We've got a unit heading to Michelle's address now to bring her in for questioning. I'll keep you updated. After the call ended, Tom sighed. So we were caught in the middle of someone's revenge scheme. Looks that way. But it doesn't explain why Deborah Sullivan was so aggressive about the whole thing. Even if she didn't know the snow machine was stolen, the way she handled it was completely unreasonable. Some HOA presidents get drunk on their little bit of power. They think their bylaws are more important than actual law. I've seen it before, though usually not to this extent. Over the next few days, the situation continued to unfold in ways I couldn't have predicted. Michelle Carpenter was arrested and charged with theft of government property, which was a federal offense carrying serious penalties. She initially denied everything, but when confronted with the security footage and evidence that she had been asking questions about Forest Service operations in the weeks before the theft, she eventually confessed. Her motive was exactly what we had suspected. She blamed Lawrence Fletcher for stealing her inheritance and wanted to cause problems for Timber Ridge, which she saw as Fletcher's pet project. By making the HOA tow a government vehicle and refuse to release it, she hoped to create legal troubles that would reflect badly on Fletcher and the board. What she hadn't counted on was how seriously the federal government would take the theft, or how thoroughly the police would investigate. She ended up pleading guilty to theft of federal property and criminal mischief, receiving a sentence of 2 years probation and 1,500 hours of community service, plus restitution for all costs associated with the theft and recovery. But that wasn't the end of the story. Mrs. Patterson, the elderly woman who had confronted the HOA board at the impound lot, followed through on her promise to call an emergency meeting. She had also reached out to several other longtime residents who were fed up with what they saw as the board's overreach and mismanagement. I learned about this from a phone call I received about a week after recovering my snow machine. The caller was Mrs. Patterson herself. "Mr. Yates, I wanted to apologize on behalf of the reasonable residents of Timber Ridge for the way you were treated. What Deborah Sullivan did was inexcusable, and I want you to know that we're taking action." "I appreciate that, Mrs. Patterson, but it's not necessary. The situation has been resolved. Perhaps legally, but not ethically. That woman had no right to treat you or the Forest Service the way she did. She's been pulling these power trips for 2 years now, and enough is enough. We're holding a special election to recall her and the rest of the board. Is that allowed under your bylaws? It is if enough homeowners sign the petition, which we have. We got the required 50% plus 1 just this morning. The election will be held in 2 weeks. I found myself impressed by Mrs. Patterson's determination. Well, I hope it works out for you and the other residents." "It will, and Mr. Yates, I have a favor to ask. Would you be willing to attend our next HOA meeting and give a presentation about the public trails in our area? Many of our newer residents don't understand the history or the importance of maintaining public access. I think hearing from a Forest Service ranger would be educational." I agreed, partly because I wanted to be helpful and partly because I was curious to see how this would all play out. Tom thought it was a great idea and suggested we make it a broader educational outreach about Forest Service operations and wilderness management. The HOA meeting was held in the Timber Ridge Community Center, a large modern building with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the surrounding forest. About 60 residents attended, which apparently was a record turnout. The energy in the room was tense, with clear divisions between those who supported the current board and those pushing for change. Deborah Sullivan sat at the head table with the rest of the board members, including Robert Hutchins and Lawrence Fletcher, who I now recognized as the man behind Michelle Carpenter's grievances. Fletcher was in his 60s, with silver hair and an expensive suit that seemed out of place for a casual community meeting. He wore the expression of someone used to being the smartest person in the room, Mrs. Patterson welcomed everyone and then introduced me. I had prepared a 30-minute presentation with photos and maps showing the history of the public trails in the area, explaining how they connected to state and federal lands, and outlining the mutual benefits of good relationships between communities and the Forest Service. The presentation went well, and I could see several residents nodding along, particularly when I explained that the Silver Birch Trail had been designated as public access by the Alaska Department of Natural Resources in 1978, decades before Timber Ridge existed. So to be clear, one resident asked, the HOA has no legal authority over the Silver Birch Trail. That's correct. It's a public access route. The Forest Service maintains it, and anyone can use it regardless of whether they live in Timber Ridge or not. Deborah Sullivan shifted uncomfortably in her chair, but didn't say anything. Robert Hutchins, however, raised his hand. But surely we have the right to control who uses trails that run through our community, even if they're technically public access. No, you don't, I said as diplomatically as possible. Public access means exactly that. You can't restrict it. What you can do is work cooperatively with the Forest Service to maintain the trails and report any issues like illegal dumping or environmental damage. Lawrence Fletcher cleared his throat. I think there's been a misunderstanding about the nature of these trails. When we developed Timber Ridge, we were under the impression that we had exclusive rights to all amenities within the subdivision boundaries. Then you were misinformed, Mrs. Patterson said sharply. As I told the board last year when you tried to put up those private property signs. Several other residents began speaking at once, and the meeting devolved into a heated discussion about property rights, HOA authority, and the mismanagement that had led to the Snowmachine incident. I caught Tom's eye and we quietly gathered our materials, figuring our educational portion was complete. As we were heading toward the door, Lawrence Fletcher intercepted us. Mr. Yates, Mr. Richardson, I want to apologize for this incident. It's clear there was a breakdown in communication and judgment. I assure you that if I had been more involved in the day-to-day operations of the HOA, this never would have happened. Really, I said, unable to keep the skepticism out of my voice. Because, from what I understand, you were at the meeting where the board decided to increase trail enforcement. His expression tightened. I supported reasonable measures to maintain order in our community. I didn't support the overzealous application of those measures. He's trying to distance himself from Deborah's actions now that it's politically convenient, Mrs. Patterson said, appearing beside us. Don't let him fool you. He's been the driving force behind most of the board's worst decisions. Fletcher's face flushed. Eleanor, your vendetta against me doesn't change the facts. I've always acted in the best interests of Timber Ridge. Your best interests, you mean? Like when you pushed through that contract with your cousin's maintenance company at twice the market rate. Or when you voted to deny the Hendersons' request for a variance, even though their situation was identical to the exception you got for your own pool house. This isn't the time or place for your baseless accusations. They're not baseless, and you know it. That's why you're so worried about this recall election. Once we get access to all the board's records, everyone will see exactly what you and Deborah have been up to. Tom put a hand on my shoulder, steering me toward the exit. Let's leave them to sort out their internal politics. We've done what we came to do. We left the community center as the meeting dissolved into chaos behind us. Driving back to the station, Tom chuckled. HOA, I've dealt with grizzly bears that were more reasonable. You think Mrs. Patterson and her group will be able to get the board recalled? Hard to say. HOA politics can be vicious, but at least some of the residents are paying attention now. That's usually the first step toward change. The recall election was held 3 weeks later. I wasn't there, but Mrs. Patterson called to give me the results. Deborah Sullivan, Robert Hutchins, and Lawrence Fletcher had all been voted out by significant margins. A new board had been elected with a mandate to review all existing contracts, policies, and procedures. "We're going to run this community the right way," Mrs. Patterson told me. She had been elected as the new president. First order of business is establishing a formal relationship with the Forest Service and making sure all our residents understand the rules around public access. That's great to hear. If you need any help or resources, just let us know. Actually, there is one more thing. We found something troubling in the financial records. It looks like the previous board had been systematically overcharging for various fees and funneling the excess into discretionary accounts that they controlled. We're talking about potentially $50,000 or more. That sounds like something you should report to the police. We already have. I just wanted you to know in case it's relevant to your case. I thanked her and passed the information along to Sergeant Phillips, who was interested but not surprised. We were already looking into Fletcher's business dealings based on some information that came out during the Carpenter investigation. This just adds to the pile. Over the next few months, the situation continued to unwind like a ball of yarn. An audit of Timber Ridge HOA finances revealed that Lawrence Fletcher and Deborah Sullivan had been embezzling funds for nearly 3 years. They had created fake maintenance contracts, inflated costs for legitimate services, and pocketed the difference. Robert Hutchins apparently wasn't directly involved in the theft, but had turned a blind eye to obvious irregularities, which made him liable as well. Both Fletcher and Sullivan were arrested and charged with embezzlement, fraud, and breach of fiduciary duty. The case moved through the court system slowly, as these things do, but by the end of the year, both had pleaded guilty rather than face trial. Fletcher received a sentence of 4 years in federal prison plus restitution. Sullivan got 3 years plus restitution. Hutchins was charged as an accessory and received 2 years probation plus a significant fine. Michelle Carpenter, whose revenge plot had inadvertently exposed the corruption, had her sentence reduced slightly in recognition of the fact that her actions had led to the discovery of more serious crimes. I'm not sure she found much satisfaction in that, given that her original motivation was revenge for perceived wrongs related to her father's estate, but the legal system worked in its own mysterious way. As for me, I got my Snowmachine back, undamaged, and went back to my normal routine of managing trails, monitoring wildlife, and dealing with the occasional lost hiker. The incident had been a bizarre detour from my usual work, but it had taught me something about the strange world of homeowners associations and the power struggles that could develop in what should have been simple community management. Tom framed the orange towing sticker that had been attached to the Snowmachine and hung it in his office as a reminder to always expect the unexpected. You never know when your day is going to go from routine to ridiculous, he liked to say. The new Timber Ridge HOA board proved to be much more reasonable to work with. Mrs. Patterson invited me back several times to lead nature walks and educational programs for residents. She also worked with us to create a volunteer trail maintenance program, where community members could help keep the public access routes in good condition. I even developed a friendly relationship with some of the residents, including a retired couple named the Mitchells who had moved to Alaska from Oregon and were eager to learn about winter wilderness survival skills. They invited me over for dinner one evening, and as we ate salmon they had caught that summer, they told me about their experience with the HOA drama. "We moved here thinking we'd have a simple, peaceful retirement," Mr. Mitchell said. "Instead, we got caught up in the most ridiculous situation. Watching Deborah Sullivan try to hold a government snow machine hostage was like something out of a bad movie. She really believed the rules in her HOA binder were more important than federal law," Mrs. Mitchell added. "It was fascinating in a horrifying way. We were just glad when Mrs. Patterson stepped up to fix things." "Has the community recovered?" I asked. "Mostly. There are still some people who supported the old board, but they've quieted down now that Fletcher and Sullivan are in prison, and the new board has been transparent about the finances and everything else. It's actually starting to feel like a community instead of a dictatorship." That conversation stuck with me. It was a reminder that systems of governance, even small ones like HOAs, only work when the people in charge remember they're supposed to serve the community, not rule it. Deborah Sullivan and Lawrence Fletcher had forgotten that basic principle, and it had cost them everything. About 6 months after the initial incident, I was out on patrol near the Silver Birch Trail when I encountered a young couple who had just moved to Timber Ridge. They were cross-country skiing and stopped to chat when they saw my Forest Service jacket. "You're the ranger whose snow machine got towed, aren't you?" the woman asked. "We heard about that whole mess. Wild story." "That's me," I acknowledged, though I was just an unwitting participant. The real story was what came after. We read about it in the Fairbanks paper. The corruption, the arrests, everything. Kind of made us nervous about moving into Timber Ridge, but the new HOA board seems okay. "Mrs. Patterson is good people," I said. And the community learned a valuable lesson about oversight and accountability. Still, must have been frustrating dealing with someone like Deborah Sullivan. We heard she was a real piece of work. I thought about that for a moment before responding. She made bad choices, definitely. But I think she started out thinking she was doing the right thing. Somewhere along the way, she got caught up in having power and forgot about serving the community. It's a cautionary tale. They nodded thoughtfully and continued on their way. I finished my patrol, checking trail conditions and wildlife signs, finding comfort in the familiar routine. Later that evening, back at my cabin, I thought about the whole strange saga. It had started with a simple phone call and escalated into theft, corruption, arrests, and a complete upheaval of an entire HOA board. All because someone thought they could tow a government snow machine and charge fees without consequences. The incident had also revealed deeper problems, from Michelle Carpenter's misguided revenge plot to Fletcher and Sullivan's systematic theft from their own community. It was a mess that had taken months to fully untangle, and the repercussions would be felt for years to come. But in the end, justice had been served. The people who committed crimes were held accountable. The community got new leadership that actually cared about serving residents rather than enriching themselves. And I got my snow machine back, plus some interesting stories to tell at ranger gatherings. Tom liked to joke that we should send Deborah Sullivan a thank you card for making the Forest Service's budget meeting more interesting that year. Nothing like explaining to the regional director why one of our snow machines was impounded by an HOA, he said. That was a first in my 25 years. Let's hope it's the last, I replied. Where's the fun in that? He grinned. Besides, you handled it well. Professional, patient, didn't let them provoke you into doing something stupid. That's exactly how we're supposed to interact with the public, even when the public is being unreasonable. I appreciated the compliment, though I wasn't sure I deserved it. There had been moments during that first conversation with Deborah Sullivan when I had wanted to say things that would not have been professional at all. But Tom was right that maintaining composure and following proper procedures had been the right approach. It had allowed the legal system to work as intended. The story made its way through the Forest Service network, becoming something of a legend. Rangers from other districts would sometimes reference it when dealing with difficult property owners or bureaucratic hassles. "Well, at least they didn't tow your snow machine," became a running joke. I ran into Sergeant Phillips at a community safety event about a year after the whole incident. He told me that both Fletcher and Sullivan had tried to appeal their convictions, but had been unsuccessful. The evidence against them had been overwhelming, and the judge had taken a dim view of people in positions of trust who abused that trust for personal gain. Especially after we found out Fletcher had been planning to declare bankruptcy to avoid paying back what he stole, Phillips said. The judge threw the book at him for that, said it showed a complete lack of remorse or understanding of the severity of his crimes. "What about restitution for the HOA residents?" I asked. Fletcher had some assets that were seized, and Sullivan's house had to be sold. "Between that and payment plans, most of the money will eventually be recovered. It'll take time, but the community will be made whole." That was good to hear. The residents of Timber Ridge had been victims of their own board's corruption, and they deserved to have their money returned. As time went on, the incident faded from immediate memory, becoming just another story in my years with the Forest Service. But every time I took out that snow machine for a patrol, I remembered the bizarre day when an HOA president thought she could hold federal property hostage over unpaid fees. Mrs. Patterson remained president of the Timber Ridge HOA for 3 years before retiring and handing leadership to someone younger. Before she stepped down, she worked with the board to create comprehensive policies about trail management, public access, and cooperation with government agencies. She also established term limits for board members and mandatory financial audits every year. "I want to make sure this never happens again," she told me over coffee one afternoon. What Deborah and Lawrence did was criminal, but it was also enabled by a system that didn't have enough checks and balances. "We've fixed that now." "You've done good work," I said. "The Forest Service considers Timber Ridge a model for how communities and public agencies can work together." She smiled at that. "I'm glad something positive came out of this disaster, though I still can't believe they tried to tow your snow machine and thought they'd get away with it. People underestimate the consequences of their actions all the time. They think their little bubble of authority extends further than it does. That's the problem with HOAs that aren't properly managed. The board members start to think they're running a country instead of a community. They forget that they're volunteers who are supposed to serve their neighbors, not dictate to them." Her words resonated with me. In my work with the Forest Service, I had seen similar dynamics play out in different contexts. People in positions of authority, no matter how small, sometimes let that authority go to their heads. The antidote was always transparency, accountability, and remembering the true purpose of the role. I continued my work in the Fairbanks area for several more years before eventually transferring to a position in Denali National Park. The Timber Ridge incident came with me as a cautionary tale. I would share with new rangers about the importance of clear communication with local communities and the unpredictable nature of working with the public. On my last day working in the Fairbanks district, I took one final patrol along the Silver Birch Trail. It was a beautiful spring morning, with the snow melting and the first signs of green appearing on the trees. The trail was busy with hikers and skiers enjoying the changing season, and I stopped to chat with several groups about trail conditions and wildlife sightings. As I rode back toward the ranger station, I passed through Timber Ridge. The subdivision looked peaceful in the morning light, with residents going about their daily routines. No drama, no corruption, no government snow machines being impounded. Just a normal community trying to coexist with the wilderness around it. I thought about Deborah Sullivan, sitting in prison, probably still convinced that she had been unfairly persecuted for just trying to enforce the rules. I thought about Lawrence Fletcher, whose greed had destroyed his reputation and freedom. I thought about Michelle Carpenter, whose attempt at revenge had backfired spectacularly, but had accidentally exposed corruption that needed to be revealed. And I thought about Mrs. Patterson and the other residents who had stepped up to fix what was broken, turning a disaster into an opportunity for positive change. That was the real story, not the dramatic arrests and legal proceedings, but the quiet work of rebuilding trust and creating better systems. Tom met me back at the station to help pack up my office and say goodbye. Over the years, we had become good friends, and he had been a mentor who taught me not just about forest management, but about dealing with the human side of the job. "Going to miss having you around," he said, helping me carry boxes to my truck. "Things are going to be boring without you attracting all this excitement." That was a one-time thing. I doubt anyone at Denali will try to tow any of our equipment. "Don't jinx it," he laughed. Though honestly, the snow machine incident made my job easier in some ways. It got everyone's attention about the importance of good community relations. We've had way fewer conflicts since then. Silver lining to a bizarre situation. Exactly. "Hey, you remember what Deborah Sullivan said to you in that first phone call, about how she didn't care who you worked for? How could I forget? That right there was the problem. She literally did not care. Not about you, not about the law, not about anything except her little sphere of authority. That's when people become dangerous, even in something as mundane as an HOA, when they stop caring about anything beyond their own narrow interests." It was a profound observation, and it stayed with me as I drove away from the Fairbanks Ranger Station for the last time. The Timber Ridge saga had been many things: frustrating, absurd, educational, and ultimately satisfying when justice was served. But most of all, it had been a reminder that every job, no matter how routine it seems, can throw unexpected challenges your way. Years later, working at Denali, I would occasionally tell the story to new rangers as part of their orientation. It always got good reactions, with people laughing at the absurdity of an HOA president trying to hold a government snow machine hostage. But I tried to emphasize the serious lessons underneath the entertaining narrative. "The point isn't just that HOAs can be unreasonable," I would tell them. "It's that we have to be prepared to deal professionally with all kinds of situations, even ones that seem completely off the wall. We represent the Forest Service, and that means something. It means we have authority, but also responsibility. It means we follow procedures even when we're frustrated. And it means we work to build relationships with communities, because those relationships matter when problems arise." The story also served as a reminder that systems of accountability exist for a reason. If Tom and I had just shrugged and paid the fees to get the snow machine back, the corruption at Timber Ridge might never have been discovered. By standing firm and involving the proper authorities, we helped ensure that justice was served not just in our case, but for all the residents who had been victimized by their own HOA board. I heard from Mrs. Patterson occasionally over the years. She would send Christmas cards with updates about Timber Ridge and photos of the trails in different seasons. The community continued to thrive under better leadership, and she took pride in having helped turn things around. In one of her last letters before she passed away at the age of 84, she wrote, "I've been thinking about that day at the impound lot, when I saw you standing there in your Forest Service jacket and realized what Deborah had done. I was so angry and embarrassed that our community had acted that way. But I'm glad it happened, in a sense, because it woke all of us up to what was going on. Sometimes you need a crisis to force change. She was right. The Snowmachine incident had been a crisis that forced Timber Ridge residents to pay attention to how their community was being run. It exposed corruption, removed bad actors, and led to meaningful reforms. All because Deborah Sullivan had made the catastrophic mistake of thinking HOA bylaws trumped federal law. Looking back on the entire experience, I recognize it as one of the defining moments of my career with the Forest Service. Not because it was the most dramatic thing I ever dealt with. I've since handled much more serious emergencies involving lost hikers, wildfires, and dangerous wildlife encounters. But because it taught me important lessons about authority, accountability, and the importance of doing things the right way even when it would be easier to compromise. It also gave me an appreciation for the complex relationships between public lands, private communities, and government agencies. Those relationships require constant attention and communication to maintain. When they break down, as they did at Timber Ridge, the consequences can be severe. The Snowmachine itself, FS 437 AC, remained in service for several more years before finally being retired due to normal wear and tear. Tom made sure it went to a museum rather than being sold at auction, specifically because of its place in Forest Service history. As far as I know, it's on display somewhere with a plaque explaining its unusual brush with an overzealous HOA. As for Deborah Sullivan and Lawrence Fletcher, they served their sentences and were released, presumably to live quieter lives far from HOA politics. I never heard from either of them directly, though I sometimes wondered if they ever understood the magnitude of their mistakes. Did they see themselves as victims of circumstance, or did they recognize that their own choices had led to their downfall? I'd like to think that spending time in prison gave them perspective and helped them understand that no one is above the law, not even an HOA president with a binder full of bylaws. But I've learned that people believe what they want to believe, and some never take responsibility for their actions no matter how clear the evidence against them. The practical outcome, however, was undeniable. The residents of Timber Ridge got better leadership, recovered most of their stolen money, and learned to be more engaged with their community governance. The Forest Service maintained good relationships with the community and continued to manage the public trails without interference. And everyone involved learned valuable lessons about the importance of understanding the limits of your authority. On quiet evenings at my cabin in the shadow of Denali, I sometimes think about that Tuesday morning in January when my phone rang with the first call from an angry HOA president. If I had known then what the next year would bring, the theft investigation, the corruption revelations, the arrests and trials, I might have been overwhelmed. But I didn't know, so I just dealt with each challenge as it came, one step at a time. That's really the only way to approach this kind of situation. Stay calm, follow procedures, document everything, and trust that the system will work if you do your part properly. It's not glamorous advice, but it's effective. The story of the towed Snowmachine became part of Forest Service lore, a reminder that you never quite know what a new day will bring when you work in public service. It's been told and retold, probably with embellishments I would never recognize, at ranger stations across Alaska and beyond. And somewhere out there, on a public access trail that an HOA once tried to claim as private property, people continue to hike, ski, and enjoy the wilderness without ever knowing the strange drama that once unfolded there. which is exactly how it should be. The forest doesn't care about HOA bylaws or property disputes, or who has authority over what. It just exists, patient and enduring, long after human conflicts are resolved and forgotten. That perspective helps keep things in proportion. What seemed like a major crisis at the time was really just a minor blip in the long history of people learning to coexist with nature and each other. But for me, and for the residents of Timber Ridge who lived through it, the incident will always be remembered as the time an HOA made the colossal mistake of towing federal property and learned the hard way that some rules really cannot be bent, no matter how much power you think you have.